Hey everyone, and welcome back to Civics Review. Today we're going to be talking about Article 1 of the Constitution, specifically focusing on the legislative branch. Well, let's get to it. Okay, so Article 1 is the first part of the U.S. Constitution, and if you forgot what that is, it's sort of like the rule book for our government and establishes the rules and procedures of how our government operates. Now, you probably are familiar with the three branches of government, but what you might not know is that each branch of government has its own article in the Constitution that specifically states what it can and cannot do. Now, Article 1 is only part 1 of 7 in the Constitution, but don't celebrate just yet. Unfortunately for you, Article 1 is the largest one in the Constitution. Of the 4,400 words in the Constitution, 2,200 are found in Article 1 alone. It's the majority of the document, so we've got a lot of work to do. Article 1 is going to focus on the legislative branch, also known as Congress. That's one of the three branches of government we have in the United States. Now, the main function of the legislative branch is lawmaking, or making laws. Imagine a bunch of lawmakers sitting around in a room, writing laws, and voting on them. Exciting! But there's so much more for the legislative branch that's described in Article 1. The legislative branch has a lot of power. They have the power to coin money, create the army, the navy, the post office. So we're going to get into that stuff. But before we do, we need to talk about this crazy word, bicameralism, which means two chambers. This word is the reason Article 1 is the largest in the Constitution. We have to split everything up into two chambers and then describe and explain it. You see, when they were writing the Constitution originally, they couldn't make up their mind as to how lawmakers would be represented state by state. Should it be balanced and even, where everybody has the same amount of lawmakers in each state? Or should it be about the population of that state? The states that have more people should have more lawmakers. Well, they argued and debated and they fought, and finally they came to a weird and awkward compromise where they would just do both. They would say, okay, each state's going to have the equal amount of lawmakers and it's going to be based on your population. Ladies and gentlemen, bicameralism. So let's start with the chamber that's based on the population of the state, and that's called the House of Representatives. They work in this part of the building, and what they're working on is making laws. Remember, they're full of lawmakers, and there's a ton of them in the House of Representatives. 435 to be exact. That's a lot. Now, these lawmakers represent the people of the states. The more people you have in your state, the more lawmakers you're going to have in the House of Representatives. Let's look at a few examples. Florida has 29.5 million people living there, and so they get 27 lawmakers in the House of Representatives. Georgia has 10.6 million people living there, and so they get 14 representatives in the House. Now, Wyoming only has 600,000 people, and they only receive one lawmaker to represent their state in the House of Representatives. That's 1 out of 435. Wyoming does not have near as much power as Florida or Georgia in the House of Representatives, and again, it's all based on your state's population. Now, the House of Representatives is actually known as the lower house. This doesn't mean that they're juniors or that they need looking after by some older or more responsible lawmaking group. They simply have less responsibilities and less qualifications to hold the position. Speaking of which, here are the qualifications to be a lawmaker in the House of Representatives, and we can find them in Article 1 of the Constitution. You have to be at least 25 years old, be a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years, and live in the state that you are running for. Meaning, if you live in Georgia, you can't be a member of the House in California. That's it. Those are all the requirements. They never check and bother if you have a formal education. They don't do a criminal background check. Nothing. If you meet these 3 simple qualifications, you too can make laws in the United States. You just gotta be elected by the people, and that's the tricky part. So we mentioned they're the lower chamber in the legislative branch, and the reason for that is they only have 2-year terms. When they are elected, they only have 2 years to do their job, and then they've got to be re-elected. We want to think of this as them having a shorter leash. If they start foaming at the mouth and making these weird and bizarre laws that we don't like, then they're out. We can vote for a new person in just 2 short years. That's like us yanking on the leash and saying, no, you don't. Remember, people have the authority in the United States. We voted for you. You didn't do such a good job. You're out. Next guy's in. That's a very short leash. And these members of the House know this. They know if they don't please the voters, then they're out. And so they want to do what's right for the people. They want to make laws that we need and that we benefit from. But that's also the reason why we see all of these signs when it comes time to vote and campaign. They're constantly on the election warpath, trying to get voted, trying to get their name out there so that they can stay in office on that short leash. Well, that's one part of the word bicameralism. So let's talk about the other chamber, the chamber that's not represented by how much people you have in your state, but that's more balanced and every state gets the same amount of lawmakers. And that chamber is called the Senate. And lucky for you, they share a lot of similarities. Of course, the other chamber, the Senate, is also made up of lawmakers. There's not quite as many though. There's only 100 lawmakers. And remember, these guys are more balanced. So every state is going to get the same amount of lawmakers. Florida and its 29 million people will only receive 2 lawmakers in the Senate. Georgia, with its 10.6 million people, will only receive 2 senators, 2 lawmakers. And Wyoming, with its 600,000 people, will also receive 2 lawmakers, or 2 senators. States with less population like Wyoming love the Senate because they have equal footing with other states. Whereas we think about the House of Representatives, they have 1. Wyoming has 1 lawmaker out of 435. In the Senate, they have the same as everyone else. So in addition to each state having the same amount of lawmakers, each lawmaker represents the entire state. Let's break this down side by side. So the Senate and the House are 2 chambers of Congress, 2 chambers of lawmakers. In the Senate, each state has only 2. In the House, it depends on how many people you have in your state. So let's take Florida for example. Florida has 27 lawmakers representing them in the House of Representatives. Let's look at that map more closely. Look at this mess. Each tiny little area of Florida is represented by 1 guy. So look at District 19. It's represented by this lawmaker. He represents only the people of this small portion of the state. The same thing is true of District 27 in Florida, which is Miami, by the way. That is represented by this person. This person is the lawmaker for all of these people inside this tiny little part of Florida. Now, if you look at the Senate, these 2 senators represent the entire state of Florida. So we want to think of the Senate as representing the entire state as opposed to representing the people of a tiny little district. Now the Senate is known as the upper house. This is the big leagues, and there's quite a few more qualifications to be in this upper house and not be in this lower Nick Jr. house. So let's take a look at the qualifications. These qualifications had to be followed by all 100 senators, and remember, we find all of these things in Article 1 of the Constitution. You've got to be at least 30 years old. You have to be a U.S. citizen for at least 9 years and live in the state you represent. And again, they're not looking at your education, your criminal history, nothing. Just these 3 requirements. That's it. And because it is slightly more difficult to qualify as a senator, we give them a longer leash. We want to think about the Senate, these 100 senators, as having more room to roam around. They serve 6-year terms, meaning if they start making some crazy laws, we gotta wait a couple years before we can vote someone else into their position. That's one of the main reasons why we think of them as the upper house. They also have a few powers that only the Senate has, and we're gonna go over them right now. Now, only the Senate has the power to approve presidential appointments. So our president, he gets to nominate certain people to work in the government in certain positions or to give him advice. Let's say he says, "I choose you, Pikachu." Well, the 100 senators actually have to approve Pikachu, and they might decide we don't need an electric rat giving advice to the president. This seems like a bad idea, Mr. President. And so they can actually say, thumbs down, choose again. Like, find someone else to be in this position, and if we like them, maybe we'll give them thumbs up. Similarly, the Senate is the only one that can ratify treaties. Our president is wheeling and dealing. He goes around to different countries and he meets with them and he makes deals and agreements. But in order to make these agreements official, those 100 senators are going to review these negotiations and make sure that they benefit the American people and they're not just benefiting our president's pocketbook or bank account. Now, the Senate is the only one that can try those accused in an impeachment. Not just the president, but any other government worker, really. Even a Supreme Court justice. Now, if you're accused of doing something so wrong that you have to leave office, those 100 senators are going to hold the trial. They're going to look at the evidence and decide officially, are you staying in office or are you out? You're being removed forcefully and going to be replaced by someone who can do the job better than you. The Senate is known as the upper house for a reason. They can flex on the lower house. They have way more powers and more responsibilities. However, the little guy's got something too. Now, the lower house, the Nick Jr. House, has a couple of powers that the Senate does not. So let's go over those real quick. Now, any law that pertains to taxes has to begin in the lower house. For all the flexing and power that the Senate has, the upper house, they cannot make a law pertaining to taxes. It has to start in the House. So that's one thing that they have. The House is also the one that's going to pass the articles of impeachment. If we are thinking about removing a government official from their position because they've done something wrong, the ones who are going to get the ball rolling is the House. If the House decides that nothing wrong has happened, we don't need to go into a trial and look at this and investigate it further, then the Senate can't really remove them from office. They wait for the lower house to say, hey, we think something's wrong, let's check this out. We're going to send it to the big brothers, the upper house, and they're going to take care of it from there. All right, but the House is the one that actually gets that process started. But wait, there's more. The legislative branch also has a number of powers not really having to do with making a law. We're going to start with the power to declare war. That's right, that's not up to the president. The actual power to declare war as written in the Constitution is found in Article 1, and it's for the legislative branch. We want all of those members, 535 total lawmakers, thinking, hey, is this really what we want to do? We don't want to leave that power in the hands of one guy. And if he just has a bad day and goes to war with somebody, that's not good for the country. And so we leave it to the lawmakers to sit down and really figure it out. Is this what we want? They have the power to create the Army and the Navy. They have the power to create a post office and set the rules up for that. They can borrow money from other countries or other businesses. They can also coin or create our money. They can create taxes for this country, whether they're taxing properties, whether they're taxing your income. They have the power to regulate trade between states and between our country and other nations. And last but not least, they of course have the power to make laws which govern us, the people. There is one more thing though that we need to mention, and this is very important because you're going to see it on your state test, and that is the elastic clause. The elastic clause is found in Article 1, and it gives the legislative branch a whole lot of power. We also call this the necessary and proper clause, and it states to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States. And when the Anti-Federalists were reading this over, they were just as confused as you. They said, wait, hold up a minute. Are you telling me that the legislative branch can do whatever it wants as long as it's necessary? That seems kind of risky, right? That seems like an incredible expansion to their powers. I mean, what if they thought that it was necessary to defend the nation that all American citizens get the Friar Tuck haircut? According to the elastic clause, this could be a possibility. This could be like a real thing. Historically, the necessary and proper clause has been used to do some pretty good things. Of course, when we wrote the Constitution, airplanes were not a real thing. But after the invention of airplanes, they decided, hey, you know what? In order to defend the skies, we are going to create an air force. We have the power to create a military and a navy. It seems like it's necessary that we also create an air force. Boom! So we use the necessary and proper clause to create an air force, and it's all legit and all legal and all found in Article 1 of the Constitution. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks so much for sticking to the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. We'll make more videos soon.